Hospitals don't sleep. They hold their breath. After midnight, the fluorescent hum levels out and the clocks get loud. That's when the stories change. Not campfire fantasy. Not internet creep. Just the kind that nurses tell each other at 3 a.m. when the coffee tastes like pennies and the beeps sound too steady to trust. My name is Jonah Mercer. I keep notes. Not the charting kind, the why did this happen kind. I believe in vitals, trend lines, protocols. I also believe some nights the ER sits between two rooms, the one we work in and the one patients cross through. Here's how they told it. She said the room taught her that silence can lie louder than alarms. She needed someone who still believes in numbers to hear it and not look away. The shift was thin. 2 float nurses. 1 sitter called out. Security walking rounds because the psych pod was full and restless. Rain all night. A slow, steady kind that makes the ambulance bay look like it's underwater. She was charged and taking a patient anyway. Bay 6. Middle-aged male. Chest pressure for 6 hours. Pale. Diaphoretic, but joking. Probably reflux, he said. Then winced. Then said, "Tell my wife I'm fine." They worked clean. Aspirin, IV, EKG, troponin sent, O2 low flow, HR in the 90s, BP 132/78, O2 sat skirting 93-94% and sticky. Pain 7 out of 10, then 5 once the nitro did its work. The resident wanted to hold off heparin until the labs came back. Conservative, smart. What made the night feel off wasn't him. It was Bay 5. Empty. Curtain half drawn. Monitor powered. No patient assigned, but showing waveforms anyway. Not vitals. Demo mode? Tech swore demo was disabled years ago. She toggled the screen. It went black. Came back. Flat baseline. No waveforms. Fine. She cleared it. Told herself it was a power burp. She went back to Bay 6. On a scale of 1 to 4, he said, smiling. The kind of patient you like. The kind that makes the job feel normal again. And then the clock skipped. That's how she described it. The wall clock above the sink ticked 02:17. Tick. 02:17 again. No tick. Then 02:18 in a slow, reluctant step. Harmless, right? Old clock, loose gear. The monitor in Bay 6 began to spread its QRS like a damp stain. Widener complexes. She checked the leads. Good skin. Secure contact. She called for a second EKG. The tech was tied up, so she printed the strip from the bedside. That's when the man asked, almost casual, "You hear the music?" She didn't. Just HVAC. The drip regulator whisper. The usual hum. He said, "It's quiet, but it's there." Where? In the walls. She charted the remark under orientation because that's what you do. Rain thickened against the bay doors. A paramedic laughed down the hall, abrupt, too bright for 2 a.m., and the empty Bay 5 monitor woke up again. Baseline. Then a beep that didn't belong to a living person. Only once. Like a test of the room. She told herself, focus, trend lines. Repeat troponin pending. Keep the man talking. Keep him here. At 02:21, his chest pain slid to a 6 with nausea. She paged the resident again. The printer spat a second strip. Slight T changes. Not the worst you'll see. Not the best either. She drew blood, labeled tight, handed it off. Then Bay 5 chimed again, louder, a single, clipped ding at 02:22. She stepped to the threshold and pulled the curtain wide. Bed neat, wires coiled, power light steady, screen black. A reflection of her own face in the glass, washed green. No admission bracelet on the tray. Nothing wrong. That was the worst part. Absolutely nothing wrong. The charge phone vibrated. Telemetry asked who was in Bay 5. Nobody, she said. We're seeing a feed. One lead only. Off and on. Can you check? Telemetry swore they had no patient assigned to that bed. Ghost-led, they said, but not like a joke. More like they wanted it to be. Back in Bay 6, Pane 5 again. He thanked her for the cold cloth. He apologized for being a bother. She told him it was literally the job. He laughed. The kind that says he didn't want to die tonight in front of a stranger. At 02:26, a code blue announcement rolled down the hall like thunder. Not her patient. ICU. Voices rose, feet moved. Their ER slowed, like the building held its breath. Her patient's monitor hiccuped. One beat missed, then back, then a PVC that didn't match his baseline. She checked his radial pulse by hand. Warm, present, steady enough. He said. The music got louder. What kind of music? Church, he said. The low kind, from when I was a kid. She wrote auditory recall versus hypoxia, monitor, sat now 92%. She adjusted the O2, no visible distress, calm face, calm voice. The room, though, that went thin, air like paper. Telemetry called back. They were getting two signals briefly labeled as Bay 6 at 02:27 and 02:28. One matched her patient. The other was a flatline tag, 4 seconds, then gone. They asked if she'd moved him. She hadn't. Could be crosstalk, they said. Could be, she said. The third troponin hadn't returned. The rain beat harder. The wall clock clicked 2:29 and held like a stuck throat. She looked at Bay 5. Its screen glowed just enough to let you know it was watching. Not bright. Patient safe dim. She told herself she was being dramatic. Told herself to listen to the evidence. Her patient asked, if something happens, I don't want the paddles. She paused. That wasn't in the chart. No DNR. No pulsed. Orientation intact. He was asking for a thing you must document correctly. Do you mean you don't want resuscitation? He nodded. Calm. Too calm. Why? He stared at the ceiling, not prayerful, not afraid, just sure. Because they already decided. Who? The quiet. She marked his statement and paged the resident for capacity confirmation. The resident was still at the ICU code. If he arrests, standard protocol, the resident said. We don't withhold without orders. She returned to Bay 6, sat on the stool, stayed. The nurse thing you do when math doesn't buy you comfort anymore. At 02:31, the Bay 6 monitor threw an asystole alarm for 1.5 seconds and self-resolved. Artifact? She checked the leads again. Gel good. Contact good. She palpated. Pulse. Present. The man opened his eyes, like waking from a nap he never took. You hear it now? He whispered. She didn't. Not at first. Then, maybe. The HVAC wasn't a hum. Maybe it was a note. Low. Organ low. The kind that shows up in a church when no one touches keys. She told herself it was the air handlers. She told herself anything but what he meant. Bay 5 chimed again, once, twice, and then the monitor in Bay 5 printed a strip. Paper crawled from a machine assigned to no one. She stood in the doorway and watched the paper fall like a white tongue to the floor. Baseline. Noise. Then a faint, perfect PQRS-T sequence. Too clean. No human skin noise. Like a textbook heartbeat pretending to be alive. She pulled the strip. Her hands shook, she said, but only a little. The timestamp read 02:31 UC. Her own patient's monitor read 0231 Mudika. 2. Perfect sync. 2 rooms. 1 second. The resident arrived, breathless, eyes tired from the code. Status. Stable for now, but she handed him the orphan strip. He frowned. Checked Bay 5. Tech glitch, he decided. Document. Power cycle. Keep trending. As he said it, Bay 6 alarmed again. HR dipped. The man's eyes went unfocused and then sharpened. I still don't want the paddles, he said quiet. Sir, the resident started, textbook calm. You're in a monitored setting. If... The man lifted a hand. They already decided. Not you. The 3 of them listened. Not church. Not exactly. But the ER had turned into a single-held tone like someone leaning on a key behind the walls. The resident changed his sentence into a swallow. He ordered labs stat. He told her to get a consent discussion ready just in case. And then the wall clock clicked. 0231 again. Again. Her portable pump alarm flashed. Infusion complete. It wasn't. She checked the bag. Half full. The pump log showed the infusion ended at 0231, and at 0231 again. She said the room felt stacked. Like 2 frames of the same film laid over each other, 1/2 a second off. The man's HR slid into the 40s. BP softened. She reached for atropine. The resident nodded. She pushed per protocol. The HR answered, grudging, then sagged again. Telemetry rang. We're seeing duplicate events from Bay 6. Some are tagged Bay 5 for 1 second. Copy, she said. Engineering might need to... The line clicked dead. The HR fell to 0 on the screen. A systole. Alarm screaming. She moved. Pads out. Gel. Hands ready. The resident said, starting compressions, and placed his hands, and then stopped. The nurse had her fingers on the carotid. Pulse, she said. On the screen, none. Under her fingers, present, strong as truth. They stared. The monitor lied, or the world did. Switch to the other lead. New cable, the resident ordered. She swapped. Screen still flat. She switched to a totally different unit. Still flat. She lifted her eyes. The man exhaled like giving something back. I told you, he said. Not smug, not scared. Gentle. He closed his eyes. The carotid faded. The screen offered nothing to argue with. They began compressions because that is the law of the room. Pushed meds because that is the sworn work. Someone called time because you have to. Time of death, 0231. The clock agreed. So did the monitor. So did the second monitor. And Bay 5 produced one last asystole line on a strip that belonged to nobody. Timestamp the same. They cleaned the room. Quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you sit in the hallway and listen for anything human. Later, she checked the pump log again. Infusion complete. 0231. Twice. She went home before dawn to a house that smelled like rain and metal. She said she stood in the kitchen and tried to decide which instrument the noise had been. Organ, air, fluorescent, or something under all 3, and which truth to believe. The screen that lied, or the pulse that told her there was still someone in the room for 3 breaths longer than the machines would admit. She still documents religiously. Trends, numbers, protocols like a creed. But when the HVAC leans low and the clocks hesitate, she waits 1 extra second before she trusts a flatline, in case the room is doubled again, in case the quiet decides before they do. That was the end of her account, and she swears to this day the quiet decided before she did. What do you think? Was it a glitch in the machines, or something else, choosing the moment. Either way, the next nurse's story picks up that same thread. Not about lying monitors this time, but about what she swore was waiting just behind the curtain. She told it to me years after it happened, but her voice still bent at the edges when she reached the middle. An ER nurse from St. Bridget's downtown. Not a rookie, 10 years in, the kind that can chart in chaos and still notice the family sitting in the corner holding their breath. She said this case was the one that made her stop walking past the chapel on night shifts. It started like any Saturday bleed. A stabbing outside a bar, young male, early 20s. He came in pale, soaked shirt, pressure held by his friends shaking hands. They moved fast. Trauma alert, IVs. Fluids. Trauma surgeon paged. The friend kept saying his name over and over, like the syllables could hold him in the room. The nurse said the bleeding was bad but not catastrophic. The surgeon was confident. Odds decent. The odd part came from the monitors again. He was awake, groaning, fighting the line placement. Then suddenly calm. Too calm. Heart rate settled at 78, blood pressure not great but holding. He looked her in the eye and said, "Don't let them near me." She thought he meant the staff, panicked, confused. She told him, "You're safe. We're here." He shook his head. "Not you. Them." His gaze flicked past her shoulder. She turned. Nobody there. Just the supply cart and a crash cart parked crooked from the rush. Minutes later, the vitals plummeted. Heart rate dropped, blood pressure unreadable. They cracked open the rapid infuser. Surgeon ready to cut. Then just as sudden, the vitals snapped back. Perfect waveforms, textbook stable, too perfect. The surgeon frowned, checked the A-line manually. Pulse not matching the monitor. Off by a beat, sometimes two. She kept charting, trying to make sense. The resident whispered, "It looks like a ghost tracing," not as a joke, like he knew it was the wrong thing to say aloud. They pushed blood, packed the wound. The patient grabbed her wrist hard enough to bruise. His eyes rolled white for a second, then focused. He whispered, "They're waiting behind the curtain." She glanced at the curtain separating Bay 3 and Bay 4. No shadows, no movement. The curtain swayed anyway, like air pushed through. At 03:14, the monitors froze. Not flatline, not artifact, just a frozen waveform, mid-beat. Timestamp locked at 03:14:08. They tore cables, swapped units, nothing. All three monitors in the bay froze at the same second. She swore the fluorescent lights dimmed when the screens did. Manual pulse still present, warm skin, patient breathing ragged. Then he said, calm as a whisper, "Don't bring me back if they take me." The surgeon barked to keep moving, keep the transfusion running. Prep for OR. Protocol ruled. The monitors clicked alive again. Time jumping to 03:16 as if 2 minutes never happened. His vitals on the screens showed a systole. His pulse under her fingers still thumped, slow but real. The surgeon started compressions. She kept her hand on the carotid and said, "He has a pulse." Nobody listened over the alarms. Compressions shook the bed. She said she wanted to scream, but didn't. She kept counting beats against the chaos. For 30 seconds the monitors lied. Then her fingers felt the pulse fade for real, slipping away under the weight of the code. Time of death called 03:17. When they wheeled the body toward the elevator, she stayed behind. She swore the curtain between Bay 3 and 4 rippled again. She pulled it aside. Empty. Just the smell of iron and bleach. Later that morning, she checked the system log. All three monitors in that bay had a gap. 2 minutes missing. No data between 03:14 and 03:16. It flagged it as system freeze. She didn't argue. She didn't need to. She told me she bruised her wrist where he grabbed her. The mark lasted a week. Every time she passed the chapel after that, she stepped inside, not to pray, just to stand in the quiet and decide if anyone was still waiting behind the curtain. She finished by telling me she never passed the chapel again without stepping inside, not to pray, but to listen. Do you think the missing minutes on those monitors were just system error? Or did something else slip through in that gap? The next nurse's story takes it even further. This time it wasn't missing time, but a patient who spoke of things no one in the room could possibly have known. She worked nights at Riverside General, a nurse who said she trusted her hands more than any screen. This case, she told me, was the one that made her question whether the patients sometimes know more than the staff ever could. It was an old woman brought in from a care home. 82, pneumonia, frail. The ambulance run sheet said hypoxic on arrival, sat in the low 80s even with high flow. Confused, altered, but still whispering words none of the medics could follow. They brought her in at ER 145. The halls were quiet except for the scrape of a mop bucket. They settled her into Bay 2. Vitals unstable, BP barely holding, O2 climbing no higher than 86. She clutched the nurse's sleeve and whispered, "It's already written." The nurse thought she meant her chart, some old confusion about paperwork. She smiled, tried to reassure. But then the woman said the nurse's full name, not the badge name, her maiden name, a name she hadn't used since nursing school. Nobody in that room should have known it. The nurse froze, asked her to repeat. The old woman nodded faintly and said, "They wrote yours too." Treatment pressed on. Antibiotics, nebulizer, labs drawn, resident muttering about intubation if she didn't turn around soon. All the while the woman's eyes followed the nurse, lips moving in a rhythm that didn't match her breaths. Like she was reciting. At 0206 the monitor alarmed, HR dropping into the 40s. O2 sat dipped to 78. They called respiratory, prepped for airway. The nurse held her hand and told her to stay with them. The old woman turned her head, looked straight at the corner of the bay, and said, "Not them, you." The nurse swore the corner darkened even though the overhead light didn't change. Just a heavy patch of air. She glanced back at the screen. HR 38, BP unreadable. They pushed atropine. Nothing. Then the woman whispered one more line. "You'll hear the knock before the end." Her pulse flickered under the nurse's fingers, then faded. Flatline on the monitor. Code called. They worked the cycle. No return. Time of death, 0209. When it was over, the nurse stepped into the hall to catch her breath. That's when she heard it. A single knock on the metal fire door at the end of the corridor. Slow, hollow. She said she walked down, pushed it open. Nothing there. Just night air and the smell of rain. She told me she went back to the bay, pulled the curtain closed, and finished the charting with her hands shaking. She never told anyone about the name the woman used. Never explained why she started jumping at every knock echoing through the ER after midnight. And that's where the night shift leaves us. One nurse listening to a flatline that wasn't. Another staring at minutes erased from the record. And a third still waiting for a knock she can't explain. Maybe it's all machines misfiring, data freezing, or minds stretched thin by the hour. Or maybe, when the ER goes quiet, it isn't empty at all. The hum, the clocks, the silence, they might be telling us more than we want to hear. If the ER really does sit between two rooms, the one we work in and the one patients cross through, do you think these stories were just coincidence, or proof that the shadows decide before we do?